In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys this $350 gaming PC that I managed to put together. And I'm also going to show you guys the performance of this PC, and you guys can let me know down in the comment section if you think it did a good job with this budget. I definitely paid way too much for some of the components in this build, so stick around to hear more about that. Let's get into it. Alright, so let's jump straight into the parts that are being used in this build. This doesn't use that many one-time deals, so you may actually be able to recreate this for yourself if you wanted to. First up is the CPU, which is a Core i5-3470, which is being cooled by the stock Lenovo ThinkCentre CPU cooler. The CPU does seem pretty decent on paper with its 4 cores and 4 threads that can boost up to 3.6 GHz. However, this CPU is starting to show its age, as you will see in the benchmark soon. For the motherboard, we got a Lenovo ThinkCentre M72H61 motherboard. This is a pretty basic OEM motherboard. It does have proprietary front panel connectors, so you may need to buy adapters if you want to use this board in a regular PC case. The front panel audio connector does require an adapter to use, and you kind of have to guess on the front panel pinout as well. This board is pretty basic and has pretty dated rear I/O, no USB 3 by the way, but I was successful at reusing the original non-standard I/O shield. Next up for the memory, we got 12 gigs of DDR3. This board only has 2 DIMM slots, and I wanted to use its original 4GB stick that came with this motherboard and CPU combo. I also wanted to have more than 8GB of system RAM, so I bought a single 8GB stick for $30, making a total of 12 gigs of RAM, which is a lot just for 8 gigs of RAM, but I also didn't want to sell this PC with another 4GB stick, which makes it 8 gigs of RAM, so I decided that I would suck it up and just buy a 1x8 gig stick. Also, by the way, this motherboard, CPU, and 4GB RAM stick combo I only paid $40 for. That's because I bought this Lenovo ThinkCentre for $40. I had all that and I decided to recase it. Next is the exciting part, which is the GPU. How much did I overpay, you ask? Well, how does $160 sound for a GTX 780? Bought this about 4 months ago when I was down bad and needed GPUs, so I bought a $160 780 and it's just been sitting ever since. This is a terrible deal, and I probably could have bought a GTX 970 or 1650 for less if I tried hard enough. Speaking of 1650s, I recently acquired a $175 1650 Super that will be in an upcoming build soon. I recommend that you do not spend $160 on a GTX 780. I would try to get a GTX 970 or better if you have a $160 budget, or wait for UJB stock to drop GPUs. Next up is the storage drive, and this is a 480 gig OCZ SSD that I actually got for free. If you want to follow this build guide, I recommend getting either a 240 gig SSD and a 500 gig hard drive, or a 120 gig SSD and a 1TB hard drive if you're on a budget. The reason this SSD was free was because of a local deal. It was a Dell Optiplex for $60 that had a 500 gig SSD and a 500 gig hard drive installed, so I just took out the SSD and sold the Dell with the hard drive for $60, which technically makes this SSD free. Up next is the case, which is definitely a pretty interesting choice, the Montech Air X in all white. The reason I picked this one in all white is because it went on sale about a month ago for just $60. This green micro ATX motherboard definitely looks weird in an all white ATX case, but as long as you don't look at it too closely, it's not too bad. This case comes with RGB fans that can be controlled with a button on the case as well. The front two are 200mm in size, and the rear one is 120mm. Not a lot of people are a fan of the big 200mm RGB fans in this case, but I honestly quite like it. Only complaint about this case is that the hole cut out for the PCIe cables just isn't wide enough for 2 8-pin cable extensions to be side by side and perfectly straight. So because of that, towards the bottom of the cable extension that you actually see, they kind of make a twist because it's just not wide enough of a hole. Speaking of cable extensions, we have some easy DIY all white cable extensions that costed me just $20. Use some pretty nice cable extensions for $20, and they also look pretty good as well. The power supply that is attached to these cable extensions is my favorite B-Stock special, and it is the $20 EVGA 450BR. These are my favorite B-Stock PSUs, and they are a step up from the EVGA W1 and W3 PSUs, and they are sometimes even cheaper than those, so I definitely should have bought more. So here's the total part list for this system and how much it actually costed. It only really costed around $320, but I decided to round it up to $350 for the title. I didn't factor in the cable extension cost because those are optional and don't affect the performance at all. That GTX 780 definitely does hurt a lot, and I'll never spend $160 on a 780 again, but maybe I'll feel better seeing these benchmark numbers. 4 games that are going to be tested today are Fortnite, CSGO, Minecraft, and Grand Theft Auto 5. Up first is Fortnite. At 1080p competitive settings, we get an average of 130 FPS. This is pretty good considering that we're using pretty old hardware, aka the CPU. The CPU is definitely the weak point of this system. The 780 still got some life left in it, even though it only has 3 gigs of VRAM, but Fortnite on competitive settings is perfectly playable. Next up is CSGO, and at 1080p low settings we get an average of 160 FPS. Afterburner quit working with CSGO for some reasons. This is more of an educated guess, but still very playable either way. In Minecraft, at 1080p fancy graphics with a 12 chunk render distance, we got an average of 180 FPS. For some reason it did way better than the i7-3820N RX 480 build that I did in a previous video, which only got 110 FPS average with only 8 chunk render distance instead of 12. Maybe that 3820 was overheating due to me using a stock cooler. I don't know. But anyways, Minecraft is very playable on the system. Finally, in Grand Theft Auto 5 at 1080p with a mixture of medium and high settings, we got an average of 55 FPS. If we turned everything to all medium, we probably would have gotten over 60 FPS, but either ways, this game is still very playable on the system. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, definitely leave a like and subscribe. This is definitely a bit of a different style, I think. I'm not even really sure, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll have a different build coming soon. You can follow this build guide if you want to, but I personally would not recommend it. There are probably a lot of other better build guides on YouTube for $350. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.